In this video, we are going to see how to get these amazing reports. First, we are going to learn how to get the total sales using a cross-tabulated report like the one you are seeing it here. And then we shall see how to get the percentage of grand total, also using a cross-tabulated report like you are seeing it here. And then we shall see how to get the percentage of column total and also percentage of row total, all using cross-tabulated report. And then we shall see how to get the difference and also percentage difference from the previous value. And then we shall also learn how to get the running total or the cumulative total like the way you are seeing it here. There is no doubt what we are going to learn today is by far one of the most important parts of a pivot table because it's at the heart of a pivot table. Let's switch on to Excel and we start creating reports. Here we have two data sets. For the cross-tabulated reports, we're going to use this data set here, and then for other reports, we shall use this small data set here. So let's start by creating the cross-tabulated reports. So I'm going to click on one cell within my data set. So I'm going to click on this data set, and then to insert the pivot table, I'm going to go to the Insert tab, click, and then from the Tables group, I'm going to click on Pivot Table. Click, it will open for me this pivot table from Table or Range dialog box. I want to create this pivot table on the new worksheet, so I'm going to leave New Worksheet selected. Then I'm going to click OK. Let me first drag my field list next to my pivot table like this, and then resize it. The first step is always to rename your pivot table. So from the Pivot Table Analyze tab, Pivot Table Group, I'm going to click on Pivot Table 1. So when I click on it, I'm going to rename it to CT for Cross-Tabulated Report. And then when I hit Actually Reports, and when I hit Enter, this pivot table is now called CT Reports. I'm also going to come down here to the worksheet, and then double click Sheet 1. I'm going to change it to Pivot CT, CT for cross-tabulated, and when I hit Enter, that's now the name of my worksheet. So I'm going to create a cross-tabulated report. That means I'm going to have my fields in both rows and columns. So I'm going to go to the field list and then drag region to the rows area like this and then drop it there. And then I'm also going to go to the field list and then drag my agents like this and then drop it to the columns area like this. Let me first drag my field list this side. This one is now my cross-tabulated report. So when I come down to the amount, I'm going to drag the amount and drop it to values. So when I drop it there, you can now see my cross-tabulated report. So what I'm going to do, let me first close the field list. I'm going to close the field list. So I'm going to do a few things here. Row labels and column labels are not good names. So I'm going to go to the Design tab, click. Then from the report layout, I'm going to show in tabular form. You can see now instead of row labels, I'm having region, and then instead of column labels, I'm having agents. Now this one here, I'm going to click, and instead of sum of amount, I'm simply going to leave it as amounts. Put there a space so that it can accept that amount, and it's in Uganda shillings. So when I hit Enter, you can see this one is now looking fine. Let me also hide the grid lines. So I'm going to go to the View tab, click, then from the Show group, I'm going to uncheck grid lines. So when I unchecked it, the grid lines are now hidden. Let me also do some number formatting. So I'm going to click on one cell within my data set, and then right click, then come to number format, click. Now because I'm already showing this one in Uganda shilling, I'm going to come to number instead of currency. Then for decimal places, I want 0 decimal places. Then I want to use a 1000 separator, checked, and when I click OK, this one is now looking fine. I've indicated the currency on top here, so it's in Uganda shillings. I'm going to give it the custom pivot table style that we created in HM&S video number 8. So with one cell selected within my pivot table, I'm going to go to the design tab, click, then from the pivot table styles, I'm going to click on the drop down list, and then from the custom group, this is actually our custom pivot table style. It's called my pivot table style. So I'm going to click on it, and this is actually how it looks. So I'm going to highlight on top here like this, and then from the home tab, I'm going to come to the fill color, click, and then I'm going to give it this dark fill color, and then from the font color, I'm going to give it white. Then I'm going to come to alignment, click on the dialog launcher, and then from the horizontal, I'm going to click on this, and then come to center across selection. When I click on center across selection, and then I'm going to click OK, that one will help my text to be centered across the selected cells. So I'm going to click on this first cell, and then type there sales report, control enter. I'm going to control B to bold it. I'm also going to increase the font size like this, maybe to 18, and this is actually our first cross tabulated report. It's a sales report. Now I want to create 3 more cross tabulated reports, but instead of going back to my dataset and then I start creating a new pivot table from my dataset here, I'm going back to the pivot CT worksheet here, click, and then I'm going to highlight my pivot table like this, and then Control C to copy it. This will help me to copy even the formats. Now I'm going to come below here and then paste it down here. So click on this cell and then Control V. This one is going to be my second report, and then I'm going to count 4 rows below here and then paste another one there, 2. I want one more. I'm going to come down here, click, and then paste another one here. Now this one is going to be our first report. This one here, we're going to change it to percentage of grand total, enter. And if you want to change the calculation, you need to right click. Now we have all these options here. Last video we talked about summarize values by, where we talked about all these aggregate functions. In this video we're going to come to show values as, and we have all these options here. Now these options are actually very many, and we are not going to talk about how to use all of them in this video, but we are going to talk about how to use some few, and the same way we use those few is actually the same way the rest of these options are used. Most of them are actually self-explanatory. The first one here is percentage of grand total, and that's actually what we want. We also have percentage of column total, and we also have percentage of row total. Now maybe before I select percentage of grand total, let me first click outside. Now from our report here, we can see that when I select a cell, like for example this one here, that means this particular cell here is actually giving me the results using 2 conditions. The first condition here is Juma, then the second condition is Northern. So that means it is a total sales for Juma in the Northern region. Now when you come down here, we have the grand total for the agents. So the grand total for Chong is this one here, the grand total for Juma is this one here, the grand total for Nekesa is this one here. Again, we also have the grand total for regions. So the grand total for all the sales in the central region is this one here. The grand total for all the sales in the eastern region is this one here. And then it goes on like that. Now the overall grand total is now this one here, which is now adding up all the grand totals for regions. This is now the overall grand total. So now when I right click, then I come to show values as, the percentage of grand total here is actually the percentage of all these sales being compared to the overall grand total here. So when I come here, and then I right click, then I come to show values as, I'm going to select percentage of grand total. So when I click on it, you can see how it's looking now. It has actually resized our columns. That's why we are seeing this. So let me highlight this one, and then I drag it just a little bit to resize the column like this. Again, I'm going to do for this one. So you can see the percentage now. So for example, this one here is showing that Joma sold 5.52% of the total sales in the northern region. So this one here is meaning 22.59% of the total sales was from the eastern region. And also, for example, this one here is saying 21.20% of the total sales was by Nekesa. So that's the meaning of these percentages. Now we can know that it's actually comparing all these figures to the overall grand total here, because the overall grand total is adding up to 100%. So that's going to be our second report, percentage of grand total. Now let's scroll down and we change this one to percentage of column total. I'm going to hit enter. Now this one we are going to change it to percentage of column total. Now when we see from here, our column totals are these totals down here. These ones are actually our row totals. So for percentage of column total, it means each of these figures in a column is going to be compared to their total, which is down here. So this one is going to be compared to this, this compared to this, this compared to this, and the same applies to the rest of the columns. So let's do percentage of column total. So I'm going to right click, come to show values as. We have the percentage of column total here. So when I click on it, you can see this time around the grand total of each column is the one adding up to 100%. So that means the figures in each column is being compared to their respective grand total. Now let's scroll down. Let me highlight this and then I resize the column like this. You can see each and every time when we change the calculation, it resizes our columns. And that one is actually very annoying. Maybe there are some people who always want to resize their column each and every time they change the calculation. But for me, I don't want that. So let's see how we can fix that. So with this cell selected, I'm going to right click. And then this time around, I'm going to come to pivot table options. When I click on it, it will open for me the pivot table options dialog box. Now when you come down here, there's this option called auto fit column widths on update. That means each and every time you update your pivot table, it will auto fit your column to fit the data set. But that's actually not what I want. So by default, it's always checked. I'm going to uncheck it so that it doesn't auto fit my columns. So I'm going to click OK. Now when we make some changes, it will no longer auto fit our columns. So I'm going to come here first of all and double click and then change this one to percentage of row total and then hit enter. Now you already know that this one is actually our row total. That means it's going to compare these values here to the row total. So I'm going to right click, come to summarize values by, come to show values as. Now sometimes these two are confusing, so you need to know which one is which. So we are coming to show values as, and then we are going to come to percentage of row total. When I click on it, you can see this time around, our grand total here on the rows are the one adding up to 100%. So that means each of these figures in a row is being compared to the grand total which is on that particular row. Now these first three options that we have seen here, the percentage of grand total, the percentage of column total, and the percentage of row total are actually the most used options when it comes to show values as. But before we end this video, I want to show you how different from and then percentage different from works. So to do that, I'm actually going to, let me first scroll up. I'm going to come back to our intro pivot table worksheet here because we want to use the second data set here. We're not going to use this data set for that. I'm going to click on it, then go to the insert tab, pivot table, or use the keyboard shortcut Alt NVT. It will open for us this dialog box. This time around, I want it on an existing worksheet. So I'm going to select existing worksheet, and then for location, I'm going to click on our pivot city worksheet, click, and I want to place it. Let me first scroll this one here. I want the pivot table to be placed on cell H4. So I'm going to click OK. Now this one will create for me the pivot table. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to drag the months down to rows area, drop, and then I'm going to drag the sales 3 times to the values area. So 1, 2, 3. And then I'm going to close the field list. Now what I'm going to do then, I'm going to go to Design tab, Report Layout, Show in Tabular Form. Right click, Number Format, Number, 0 decimal places, thousand separators, check, click OK. Right click, Number Format, Number, 0 decimal places, 1000 separators, check, click OK. Let's do for this last one. Right click, Number Format, Number, 0 decimal places, 1000 separator, then I'm going to click OK. I've gone ahead to give it these formats and this title. Click on my pivot table, come to the Design tab, from the pivot table styles, click, then I'm going to apply our custom pivot table style. Click, and this is how it will look. Now this one here, we are going to leave it as sales. Click and type there sales, then I'm going to leave a space so that it can allow sales, and then tab here I'm going to have different, tab here I'm going to have percent different, and then enter. For the first column here, we are going to leave it as sales. That one is actually our total sales for each of these months. Now I'm going to come to this second column. I want to see the difference between these sales here. From January to February, what was the difference? And then from February to March, what was the difference? And then from April to May, what was the difference? So I'm going to get the difference from the previous value. So when I click on this cell, and then right click within the column you want to change the calculation, then I'm going to come to Show Values As. Now from here I'm going to come to Different From. When I click on Different From, it will open for me this small dialog box. Now you can see it has the base field, and of course our base field is going to be months. It's going to use the months field as our base field. Then for the base item, instead of saying February, I'm going to click on it. I don't want the base item to be February. If the base item is February, that means each and every figure is going to be compared to the figure of February. But for our case here, we don't want the base item to be any months. We want the base item to be the previous months, so that when it comes to April, it will get the difference between April and March. When it comes to June, it will get the difference between June and May. When it comes to December, it will get the difference between December and November. So you can see on top here, we have previous and then the next. So if you want to get the difference from the next item, then you need to select next. But for my case, I want the difference from the previous value. So I'm going to click on previous. So our base field is going to be months. Then our base item is going to be previous. So when I click OK, you can already see that for the first figure here, which is January, there's actually no difference. So it's going to leave that one blank. But when it comes to February, you can see it's now getting the difference between February and January. So whenever you see a positive number, that means the value or the amount went up. Whenever you see a negative value, that means the value or the sales went down. So from March to April, it went down by 10,900 Uganda shillings. So that's actually what the difference from does. If you also want to see the percentages of those differences, you can as well do percent difference from. So let's do that. I'm going to come here and then right click, come to Show Values As. We select the difference from. We also have percent difference from down here. So when I click on it, the base field is still going to be months. Then for the base item, I'm going to change it to previous. Click, and then when I click OK, you can see from August to September, the sales went up by 33.89%, and from November to December, it also went up by 50.75%. So those are actually very important options for analysis. Let me resize my columns like this. Now I'm going to use the same pivot table here. So I'm going to copy this one here, highlight, Control C. Then I'm going to come here and paste it here, Control V. Now I'm going to right click, come to show field list, click, because I want my field list to be shown. I'm going to drag out one of the fields like this. I want to remain with only 2 fields. So I'm going to close the field list. Now what we're going to do here, instead of different from and percent different from, here we're going to do running total. So I'm going to double click this and then highlight and simply call it running total. Enter. Now here we are going to do running total. I'm going to click here, also change it to running total, RT. Now for running total, that one is actually the same as cumulative total. It means it's going to be adding all these figures together as it goes down. So from January to February, it's going to add the figures and put the total here. Then when it comes to May, it will add up the amounts from January all the way to May and put the amount here. So it will go on like that until it adds all the amounts and it will put it to December. So that means the value that's going to be for December is going to be the total values from January all the way to December. So let's change the calculation to running total. So I'm going to right click, come to show values as. I'm going to come here and come to running total in. It's actually called running total in, not just running total. It's running total in. So when I click on it, it will open for me this dialog box again. I want the base field to be months, and when I click OK, you can already see from here. Let me first resize it here. You can already see the first one is actually 20,000. It is this particular amount here. When it comes to February, it's actually adding up these two. When I highlight it, you can see the total, the sum down here. It's actually 43,500. Now when I highlight all this one all the way to September, you can see the total amount here. It's actually the same as the total amount which is put here. So by the time you reach December, that will be the overall total for all the sales from January all the way to December. So that's actually called the running total in, or you can call it cumulative total. In statistics, we like calling it cumulative total, but Excel is calling it running total in here. Yeah, that is it for this particular video. If you haven't subscribed, please do subscribe. The next video that I recommend you watch is this video where we talked about summarize values by. That one is actually another important part of a pivot table that you need to know how to use it. Until next video, then we meet again. Thank you.